Before we start writing code, let's look at an aid program to get some idea of what it looks like and what the syntax is. Would you like to look at a program other than OPSTDS6? How about if we go to the output programs instead of the file edits, and this time let's look at OpStop6, which is the cousin to OPSTDS6. Life just isn't fair, is it? Let's talk about syntax first. The basic element of the aid programming language is a statement. This is an English-like sentence that in its simplest form has a verb and a single operand. Think of the operand as the direct object of the verb. The subject of the verb is implied. It's the computer. Operand 1 is the data the verb takes action on. Some examples of simple statements in this program would be at line 49. We have a verb, go to, and we have our operand, loop 1. And notice that it ends in a period. At line 123, we have our verb, output. We have our operand, sppath. It also ends in a period. And at line 156, we have a verb, perform. We have an object that's unpronounceable, and it also ends in a period. Don't worry about what this code means yet. Just notice that the simplest code lines look like sentences. They have a verb, a direct object, and end with a period. Actually, aid even has a verb or two that don't need operands, such as the exit verb here. To build on the statement concept, many verbs have two operands, with the second being referred to as a prepositional phrase. Yuck! That's really stretching the English sentence analogy, but I guess that's why this is called a language. Anyhow, some simple examples might be line 23. Our verb is open, our first operand is this thing, and our second operand is 1. Line 38. Actually, we have 3 of the same here. The verb is move, and we're moving something to something, and we end the statement with a period. And let's also look at line 124. Here the verb is add, but we're also adding operand 1 to operand 2. The aid language can modify the verb. It's done with a control function. And if we continue with the analogy, we can call these control functions adverbs. Remember your high school grammar? What do you mean you don't want to? An adjective modified or described a noun, and an adverb modified or described a verb. Some examples might be line 31. Here, the control function is in angle brackets, and in this case, it modifies the verb by telling it where to show something instead of using the default. If we go to line 86, we have another control function in angle brackets, CRLF, and it's used a lot in the output statements for this program. Let's read another program into buffer 2 so I can show you some other control functions. Do you remember how to do that? We'll press function key 2, and we want to select buffer 2, so we'll next press the digit 2. Now we'll press function key 10, the letter R, and the file I want to look at is an external, and the name of the file is opxaccdt.et. And we don't have to go far to find a couple more control functions. Here's one called date4, and here's the word top, also in angle brackets. Before we mention any more complicated types of statements, you need to know about Unibase's execution cycle. All aid programs follow the same execution cycle. Whenever, wherever, or however an aid program is executed, Unibase starts at the beginning of the program and performs each line of code in sequence, unless the code instructs the program to go elsewhere. This type of sentence is called a conditional because it changes the program flow based on a condition that you test for. Some examples are lines 22, 23, and 24. Line 29 is a different type of conditional. The other one was if. Here, it's the else statement. And we have another example of the else statement in line 38, right here. Conditionals bring up two more syntax conventions for aid. In order to change the program flow, you have to have a way of identifying where the program should go. All programming languages do this with a label. In aid programming, the label always starts with an exclamation point followed by at least one alpha character. Some examples might be, up at the top, our exclamation point ACC date, our exclamation point MO. If I go down to the end, we have a slightly different one here, exclamation point with a capital E, ACC DAT. And we can also use numbers in the label as long as they don't immediately follow the exclamation point. There's another syntax form you need to be aware of. Sometimes you use a conditional in such a fashion that you want to execute several statements in a row only when that condition occurs. Then continue with the rest of your program. You string together several statements for a conditional by ending each statement with a semicolon instead of a period. When the condition is met, all statements following are executed that end with a semicolon until you reach a statement that ends with a period, and that's the last statement that is executed. If the condition is not met, aid doesn't execute any of the statements. It looks for the period, and then it starts executing the code from that point on. An example would be at line 63. Here we have a conditional that's an if statement. If the condition is met, we're going to execute 3 lines, a move statement, a show statement, a go-to statement. If the conditional is not met, we're going to not execute any of these lines and jump down to execute this move. The aid program knows to skip all 3 of these statements because this one ends in a semicolon, this one ends in a semicolon, and then when we finally hit one with a period, that's the point at which aid picks up execution of the program again. Confusing? Probably, but this is only an overview. We'll take some baby steps in a later lesson. The next lesson will be about what all these operands can be.